But the meeting today is about comparison, comparing, and it's led by Lydia and myself. And we're going to try to tackle, what is comparison? What does it mean from a biblical perspective, and also a practical perspective that we've experienced in our lives. So exciting stuff coming ahead, and Lydia is going to share with us as well. But just a quick, kind of intro to this. I wanted to start off with a bit of Bible just to begin with. It's very short and easy, but the very first thing when Adam saw Eve for the first time, the first thing he said, she's like me, only different. So we can see from the very, very, very beginning that Adam looked at himself and he compared himself to Eve by saying, she's like me, only different. There was a kind of an evaluation process that happened there. So I'm going to pass it to you now, Lids, and Lydia will kind of share a story that she wanted to share with us today regarding this topic. So all yours.
Sure, thanks, Dave. There's just a quote that I once heard my pastor preach one Sunday, and it really struck with me since that day. And he said that the fastest way to kill something special is by comparing it to something else. And I think that's very true, because we compare, like when we compare ourselves, or when we compare one thing with the other, what we are doing really is we are devaluing what's precious and what's unique. And I think comparison only really highlights insecurities and the dark corners of our hearts. And that's something I personally experience like every now and then. I think when I was a little girl, I thought that comparison was just a teenage thing. And that when I'm older, I'm going to stop comparing myself. And yeah. But few months ago, so it was like the start of the year. Wow, the year has flown by, which is good. I literally spent months like in this cycle of comparison, and I didn't even realize that I was comparing myself. So yeah, and what I usually compare myself with, say, like if I'll read a story or if I'll read an article, or if I read a book, and I'm gonna be like, oh, that's such a great story, that's a really good writing, really awesome author, what a great journalist to write the story. They're very brave to do that. They're very talented, and they're very gifted, and they're such great writers. And I just start comparing myself to them. And I forget that this journalist who's written this awesome story, they have like 20 years experience. So of course they're going to be better than me. Of course they're going to write better stories, because they've been doing it for so long that they can just do it in their sleep. And I think another thing we compare ourselves with is speed. So say like if it took someone a month to accomplish something, it might take you a year to do that. And then we just start comparing ourselves, and we start thinking that we're not as good, or we're not as skilled, or we're not as qualified because it took us longer to do that. And we forget that everyone has different circumstances, and everyone has come from different backgrounds, and we all have different experiences. So to compare, it just like blurs the vision. It really blurs your focus, and it just gets it off. It gets the focus of what truly matters. And then one thing leads to another as well. So comparison, well, it leads to is jealousy. And then jealousy leads to bitterness. And then bitterness, it leads to sin, it leads to hatred, it leads to anger. And all these things, they just make you feel awful. And then all you think about is those things. And the more you allow those things in you, it will be harder to actually move forward. At least that's been in my experience. And actually, it's great that you touched on the story in the Bible, Dave, because the second comparison that happened and that led to jealousy, actually, and then jealousy led to murder, was between the two brothers, Abel and Cain. And that's in Genesis 4, if you're interested to read that. And how basically jealousy led to someone killing their own brother. And I think we do that sometimes mentally and emotionally. In our minds and in our hearts, we kill other people, even though it's not physically. So Dave, I want to ask you a question. How can you recognize you've fallen into the rabbit hole of comparison?
Yeah, I think with this one, the thing that comes to mind is the parable of the talents. And why that comes to my mind is because in that particular story, everyone kind of got bits of talent, and it was their job to make that talent grow and make something out of those talents, to either, double it or to increase it in some sort of way. But what happened in this Bible story, I didn't want to read it because it was long, but some hid it, and some actually did something with it and multiplied it and made it grow. But what I mean by that is you have to recognize that God has given each one their own abilities. God has given each person their personality and has shaped them in a particular way that it's for you to accomplish. Like if you don't accomplish what God has put into your life, no one else is going to accomplish that, because it's particularly made for you. Like God has made you with these particular characteristics so that you are the one who plants that particular seed in there. Doesn't mean that no one else is going to do things along the same line, but particularly when it is you, it means it's something that God has put in you from the start. So by recognizing, to answer your question, is how do you recognize you've fallen into that rabbit hole? I say, what has God put into your life? Evaluate yourself and look at yourself and say, well, what's my talent? What has God put into my life? Am I looking into what my neighbor has done, or am I just trying to hold on to the things that I have so I don't waste them in some sort of way? Am I trying to grow? Am I trying to move to that next step and evaluate my life in that way to progress? Or am I just holding and clinging onto the things that matter me the most, and there's no growth process? There has to be kind of a development stage that happens there. And if you're not constantly looking at yourself and you're not constantly evaluating yourself, it's very easy to fall into the trap of comparing yourself and looking at others and that sort of thing. So yeah, just I'd say evaluating yourself constantly, I guess.
And how do you think you can get yourself out of that rabbit hole,
It has
especially
to,
spiritually, like
yeah,
from the spiritual aspect?
it has to come back to the Bible. Like I think there's too many people in the church today who look up to Drake more than they look up to God. And are you looking at these celebrities? Are you looking at the world? Are you looking at everything that is happening around you as, I want to be like these guys. I want to have the fame. I want to have um, the lifestyle, the partying, the whatever. Is this what you're aiming for? Are you trying to aim for that materialistic success that the world says is great? Or are you looking at what the Bible says? Jesus washed his disciples' feet. Jesus washed people's feet. He would go down to the lowest level to the dirt and clean people's feet who were being used all day. Are you a servant, or are you wanting to become the one serving at the table? Are you serving, or are you wanting to get served, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And I think when we compare, it's not only affecting us, but we also actually do the opposite of what the Bible tells us. We begin to, because of all the bitterness, of all the anger and all of the hatred that's like within us, because we start comparing ourselves to all these people, and we start feeling jealous of them. We find it difficult to like be supportive of them, to like cheer them on, because we it like the fruits of comparison are bitterness and jealousy and selfish ambition, which is the opposite of what the fruits of the spirit are. And I'm actually going to read James 3:14-16. It's a really great verse. But if you have a bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and envy, vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And I think if we actually spend as much time, like you said, reading the Word of God and just diving into it and feeding our minds and our hearts with the Word of God, then, comparing ourselves. And I think comparing ourselves is another sign to like being self-centered, because then why are you comparing yourself, right? You're comparing yourself because you lost the focus on what's important, and now you're actually just focusing on your own like desires and your own ambitions and on your own needs and what you want to do and what you want to accomplish for yourself, and by yourself. And I think that kind of shows how selfishness also comes in the way of comparison.
And do you think, like, where is that coming from? Like, what's the root of this issue? Where are we sourcing our value and our worth?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of it goes back to value. And I think a lot of it comes from like the external sources, like the world and everything around us. And like a simple example, social media. And we use social media every day of our lives. It's probably the first thing most of us do when we wake up. And it's so easy to just look at someone and be like, oh, like, I wish I had that. Oh, I wish I looked like that. Oh, I wish I had that car. I wish I had that house. I wish, I wish, I wish, I wish. And we focus I think that just shows us that what we actually focus on, we focus on a lot of like physical appearance of what someone else's life looks like. But what is that someone else's life actually like? Right? They might be the unhappiest person. They might be having relationship problems. They might be struggling in different ways that we actually don't see. And I think we forget about that very often. And we just get fooled into what we see in front of us. All you see right now is my face, but you don't know what my room looks like. You don't know what's in me. And I think a lot of times we tend to overlook that aspect when looking at someone else's life. So I think a lot of times it's when you don't know your value, comparison is the first thing that's going to pop up, because you don't know who to identify yourself with. So if you haven't identified yourself completely with God, the ground that you're standing on is not firm, and anything that will come at you, it's just going to be bumpy, and you might fall, and you might fall hard. It depends on what's going to hit you. So I think knowing where your true worth actually comes from makes a huge difference, because then you're not so lost into trying to compete with someone, trying to reach someone else's standards, because at the end of the day, we're all human. Like Dave, like, you're not perfect, I am not perfect. So if you try so hard to be like me, or if I try so hard to be like you, like, it's not gonna work. Like, none of us is perfect. Like, you have your flaws, I have my flaws. So it's it's just a cycle that you're just gonna keep on running around. Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah. Like I think it's so popular now for all these motivational speakers and celebrities coming out and all that sort of stuff. Like what the world tells you is, believe in yourself, believe in your own abilities, and trust in the process. Do the grind and climbing up the ladder and that sort of thing. But the Bible is so contradicting towards that. The Bible is all about believing in God and relying on Him being the cornerstone, the spine of everything. You can't go and do what the world says. And the funny thing is, all these, as I said, motivational speakers are coming out and they're saying believe in yourself. And it sounds great, like to a non-trained ear, it sounds really motivating and it really gets you excited, and you're saying to yourself, you know what, I'm going to wake up every day, I'm going to chase my dream, I'm going to try to accomplish all that I want to do in life. But man, like, if you really look at the Bible, if you really look at the character of Jesus and what he did on earth, he was against the grain. The man was doing, everything that contradicts that. All the focus was on God. All the focus and attention and the prayer and the learning and everything like that was based on him and what he wants. You can have your aspirations, you can have your dreams, but are you willing for that to be, I guess, crushed because God wants you to do something completely different? Well, if your answer is no, if your answer is I want to do what I want to do, then you haven't really submitted to God. You haven't really devoted yourself to God. Because I think every Christian has to be at a place with God where they are obedient enough. What are you so passionate about? Are you passionate about your career? Are you passionate about your money? Are you passionate about a family? Are you passionate about whatever? What if you wake up one day and God tells you, I want you to give all that up? Would you give it up? Because the answer is, as a Christian, we know it's supposed to be yes, and we know, a Christian life is supposed to be about obedience and trusting in God and wanting to do what pleases Him. But it's so easy to say and so much more difficult to do. What is it in your life that is truly important? The verse that I wanted to read is Galatians 1:10. It says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." That last line hits hard. If I were trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. If you're looking at your life and you're looking at all the people around you and you're saying, I want that. That guy has a nice car. I want that car. That guy has a nice house. I want that house. You cannot be a servant of Christ if you're trying to please man. What do you want? The status? Do you want what do you want that comes with it? Because the things that you desire in this life, something comes with it. Yeah. People look at you and they say oh wow, like this guy is awesome. He's got all of this, but are you a servant of Christ? Can you be a servant of Christ if that's truly your aim and that's what you're looking for? Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." Do not conform to the patterns of the world. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Like, I don't even know what to say, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I think everything that you said like goes back to purpose. Like, what is your purpose in life? And I think
Are
a
you
lot of
asking me?
time, no, this is like a rhetorical question, but feel free to answer. Like, yeah, what is your purpose in life? Do you know what your purpose in life is? Do you know what are the gifts that God has put in you so you can fulfill the purpose and the passion that He set in us? Because every single one of us, we are gifted in a different way. Dave, you know how to edit videos. I can write. Shady can play 10 instruments. Michelle paints. There's so many talents among us, right? And imagine if we all actually use these talents and gifts to glorify God, to build his kingdom, and to spread the gospel and to love people around us. And a lot of time, I think we forget that it's in those little things that we do that we actually show our love to people, that we show the grace of God, that God's light shines through us as we use the things that he set in us to spread the love and the grace of God. So yeah, I think an important question to ask ourselves is, what's the purpose? Because if you don't know your purpose, you're gonna try to seek purpose in other things. And if you're not seeking purpose in God, you're gonna seek it in the world. And what does the world has to offer? Nothing. Everything the world offers is going to be disappointing at some point. It's going to be fun, it's going to feel good, it's going to look good, but then you're going to get to a point where you won't feel satisfied, where you won't feel accomplished, where you will feel like you're still missing something. If you ask many rich people, billionaires, a lot of them, you know, they feel lonely. A lot of like actors have committed suicide. Why? Because they've done so much in their life and they've been very successful, but they've reached the point where they couldn't fulfill the God given hole in us that only God can fill. And that's the funny thing. I think like if we look at their life, we're gonna be like, oh, like they have everything, and then we compare our lives to them. But I think life is truly richer with God than without him. And it's not about, I think, how much money we can make and how much money we can have, but it's what we are actually rich in, like what our mind is rich in, what our heart is rich in, and all the things that truly matter. And one of my actually favorite Bible verses, and this is something I always try to remind myself of, is it's actually Galatians as well. Galatians 5:22 is the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And so where do those things come from? They come from God. And the more we seek God and the more we spend time with him, we experience those things and we obtain those things, and we can live our lives with those traits because of God, and because of how much time we spend with him, how much time we spend reading his word and filling our minds with his word, and allowing his word to change us as well. It's not just the verse that we read and then, oh, that was good, that was very encouraging, but really like allowing it to change us and shape us into more Christ-like. So yeah.
And what do you think comparison actually reveals about a person's character, or kind of their deep longings internally? What's happening to that person?
Right. I think that's a very good question, actually. Look, I'm sure everyone at some point have experienced comparison. Maybe some of you are in that state now. Maybe you were in that state a week ago. Maybe you will be in the next few weeks. I think something we all struggle with, and that's completely fine. Like, we're human and we're going to struggle and we're going to be tempted. I think it just reveals, it's a really good question. I think for me, it just reveals like fears, or like fear of failure. Because if you think about it, like, why do we compare ourselves? Because we feel like we're not reaching our full potential, or like we're not meeting like the expectations. So it's that like fear of failure, fear of failing, fear of, I think it's fear, it's insecurities. I think a lot of times, like, our insecurities are revealed through comparison. Like, you realize how insecure you are, or like what you're actually insecure about, when you compare yourself to others. And like I mentioned in my previous example, when we started, like when I compare myself to other writers, for example, revealing an insecurity in me that I didn't know I had. And yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think there can be a good side to
Mm-hmm.
comparison. I think there can be a positive to this. If you look at other people around you and you see something that spurs you on, or something that motivates you with their actions or their examples, instead of comparing yourself and feeling bad about yourself, you can look at the possibilities of improvement in your character. I always say, look at the people around you and take what's good and leave what's bad. Um, there's and I think by doing that is you compare yourself. You look at others and you say, oh, they have this in their aspect of life, and I really appreciate that. You can adopt that. I don't think that's a negative thing in used in the if used in the right way. So yeah, I guess that's the flip side of it, that it can be something that builds you up and changes your characteristic in that. So I guess, yeah, it can be like a call to action for us as well. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point you raised. I did not see it like that. I just looked at the negative side, but I like what you said on how like we can actually, when we compare ourselves, it's a good time to like question. Oh, like they're good at this, then maybe this is something I can improve in myself as well. Um, yeah. When when do you, like looking at your own life, when do you feel like you have compared yourself the most?
I think with the things that I struggle with most, um, I'll give you an example that just popped into my head. But I remember at school, I'm not a very book smart type of person. I'm a very practical learner. And at school, obviously, it's pretty much all about, sitting in front of a book and learning that way. And I really, really struggled with that. And there was a moment that I remember really, really well. It was, I think, during year 11, where I was not getting good grades. And I'm not saying, well, look, I didn't really try, but I also wasn't the book smart type of kid. And then I remember sitting down with God, and I was telling him, like, God, you know, there's all these people in my life and my closest friends, and that they're so smart and they're getting such good grades, and they're, you know, going down the path of where they want to go. And I remember just, being in tears in front of God and saying, like, God, it's not fair. Why did you create me like this? Why am I not smart like the rest of my friends and not capable? And I can't do this and I can't do that. And God's answer to me during the time is, I've blessed you with other things. Um, so what I mean by that is, we are so focused on the things that we can't do that we lose track and lose sight of the things that we have been blessed with. Instead of looking at your life and looking at all the holes that are in it, why don't you look at your life and say, I've been blessed in this way. I've been blessed in this way. And don't just leave it there, but look how you can enforce that into your lives in a positive way. Um, the verse that I want to read regarding this is Galatians 2:20. I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I have been crucified with Christ. This life is not ours. So again, it's going back to purpose, I know, but I guess that's the point of it all, is that what are you doing? Like, what are you striving for? Are you running towards a goal that you have set, or are you running towards a goal that God has set for you? God has plans for every single person, as we always say, but what are you doing to kind of reach those goals? Have you ever even questioned that, what you're doing right now, the course that you're studying, or the relationship that you have, or the whatever, every aspect of your life? Have you ever even questioned that? Have you ever brought that in front of God and asked God, God, is this what you want me to do? Is this where you want me to go? Or was that just purely driven out of things that you wanted to do, and things that you've seen perhaps others doing in their lives, and you said, oh, that might be a good thing to do. Why don't I pick it up? Are you bringing the small and the big in front of God, or are you just making your own decisions as you go?
And I just had a question in my head. Do you think that comparison can delay the process?
Do you want to elaborate?
So, sure. Because when you're comparing, you're spending time doing that, right? So instead of like spending that time actually investing in accomplishing what you need to do, you actually spend it by doing the complete opposite, which is comparing yourself. Oh, actually, I'm not that good because that person did it better than me. So I might just as well not do it, right? So do you think that because when you compare, I think you pause the process. Like you just take a moment and you go like, oh, hey, hang on, like why am I doing this? Like, am I even capable of getting to the end? So do you think that it can delay the process?
Actually, one of the things that personally annoys me most is when people say like, oh, I'm not very good at this, or I want to do this, or I'm really excited to try this, and they just don't do anything about it. And I find that a lot of Christians, including myself, I'm no better, but a lot of Christians would say like, oh, I wish I knew my Bible better, or I wish, I've been blessed in this sort of way. Like I've taken devotions before, and it went well, but like, yeah, more opportunities will come. Or like they're not actually investing in what they've been given. And that's really frustrating. Like, for example, if you want to know your Bible more, look at how many hours that you've spent on Netflix the last week, or look at the amount of time that you spent on the PlayStation, or just pointless hours on hours end that you are literally doing stuff that doesn't really matter or is not significant. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying, how much of that time are you giving? Because at the end of the day, you're just giving empty words, by you having a conversation with someone and saying like, yeah, I wish I knew my Bible more. Well, okay, what are you doing about it? Are you actually trying to learn the Bible? How are you investing in that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I had another question, and that was about gratitude. Do you think that comparison comes in the absence of gratitude? As in, like, actually being grateful for what you have and what God's given you.
Why don't you answer that one first, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Sure. I think when I look at it, I think that comparison is the absence of gratitude. I think gratitude is a huge factor in our lives, and I think when you're not grateful, like if I just sit here and complain about my assignment for the next 2 hours, like I'm being ungrateful for the opportunity that I actually have to study, to learn, to graduate, and then to be able to get a job and to fulfill, the dream that I've always dreamed of. So I think that, I think comparison is the absence of gratitude. And I think that, because it's always easier to just kind of lean into the negative side than the positive side. It's always easier to say, oh, I don't have that, than to say, oh, I have that. So I think that's what I personally think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, I think also there is something further than that. So I think, it's good to be grateful, but it's also good to implement new things in your life and grow in that process with God. He's given you abilities and gifts, and it's your job to nurture them, and it's your job to grow them. I'm grateful for them, but you can also make them grow as well. So that was the thing that I would just add on top of that.
And actually, that leads me to another question. Do you think that comparison can come from lack of trust in God?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Can you elaborate more on that?
It just depends where, like, you have to evaluate yourself and say, like, where is this comparison coming from? What's the roots of it, as we mentioned earlier? Is it coming from a place of insecurity or dissatisfaction or whatever it may be? Because I guess if you're questioning that process, do you really understand the character of God and who He is in that? Because God is a safety. Like, God, there's so much safety in Christ and who He is. And once you actually understand Him, you understand His character, and you know who He is, you run to that instead of running to your emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think emotions, like they say, emotions, or is it feelings? Feelings are followers, not leaders. I think sometimes we allow them to be the leaders, especially the negative ones. I've personally done that. But I think it's important to just be aware of what you're feeling and what you're thinking, and recognizing that. And like you said, Dave, evaluating. I think evaluating is such an important process, because if you just ignore it, it's not gonna. I think that's another thing. A lot of times we just ignore what we're feeling, ignore the thoughts that we have, and we think that they're just gonna magically disappear. But it's actually the opposite. The more you leave them there, the more they'll pile up. And the more they pile up, actually, the harder it's going to be to get rid of it. And who better to go to than God, and allow Him to help you get, to replace those feelings and thoughts with His thoughts, and with His truth. And
yeah, I guess we're about to finish because we don't have much time, but is there any last thoughts that you wanted to add on the topic of comparison?
I think what I just encourage every person to do is, when you find yourself in that cycle, go to God, and allow Him to help you with that struggle. I've personally struggled with, and every time I go to God, because He's the only one who can actually help you get out of that cycle. Or if you want to go and talk to someone about it, go talk to someone that you trust about it as well. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is that don't let it live in you, kick it out. It's not meant to live in you. There are far more precious and greater things that you should allow space in your heart and your mind to stay and to live there. So, and comparison is not one of them, and comparison is not from God. And God would not want you to compare yourself to anyone else, because He's made you unique, and He's made you for a purpose. And I just encourage you to seek God and seek the purpose that He's created you for.
Awesome. I want to finish off by reading a verse, and a bit of context in what was happening at this particular time is the disciples were having a dispute, and they were saying, like, who's the greatest among us disciples? And the reply Jesus gave is what I want to read, and that is from Luke 22 verse 26. And Jesus said to them at the time, "But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you be as the youngest, and the leader as the one who serves. For who is the greater, one who reclines at the table or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves." And yeah, I guess that's the point. The point is that don't compare yourself with other people. Understand that it's not about you reaching anything. It's about you coming as low as possible, just as Christ did. and serving the world, serving the people around you, those who hate you, those who love you, those who don't, whatever. It's about you being in that environment and serving everyone that comes into contact with you. So I guess it doesn't matter, like the whole question or the whole topic that we're talking about, it doesn't matter, like don't focus on comparing yourselves, just focus on serving people and loving people, regardless of what anyone does for you or regardless of what anyone has or doesn't have in their lives.
Absolutely. And there's just one last verse gonna end it with. It's Philippians 4:8, sorry. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is any worthy of praise, think about those things. So I guess next time you find yourself in that cycle, think about those things that are mentioned in Philippians 4:8, which they ultimately come from God.